Hello, my sweet children of the universe. It is I, Dave Makes Noises, the Kenny Beats of Dungeons & Dragons Storytime on YouTube. Back with another question for you. What is the most hilarious thing that's happened to you in D&D when you've rolled a 1 for a critical failure? Part 2. We didn't think much of it at the time. The party had gone through a wizard's tower from top to bottom in my homebrew world. Every level focused on a specific school. The basement level was, of course, necromancy, and by this point my party was exhausted, and their resources were almost completely used up. They meet the head necromancer, Corvin, in his laboratory. He prepares some sort of standard necromantic obstacle for them to face, zombies, necrotic traps, etc., and the party grits their teeth, expecting the worst, except for our half-orc barbarian. The barbarian tries to convince Corvin to let them pass in exchange for one of 2 oars from the party's rowboat, which the Nimrod happens to have been carrying around all this time. He even has gone so far as to have drawn faces on them and named them, all of which transpired well before the tower scene. I figure why not, and I roll to see if Corvin buys the extremely uncharismatic half-orc's offer. He rolls 1. Scene is bypassed without a single encounter, and the chief necromancer of the wizard's tower is left with an oar named Steve. Of course, the necromancer eventually figures out that he was duped, but now he's more or less become the Team Rocket of the party. An inside joke. Too smart for his own good. The party goes their own way, largely forgetting about this wizard. But the wizard, he hasn't forgotten them. And so eventually, the players find their way back to the wizard's tower, needing a timely teleportation spell to an island surrounded by a perpetual hurricane in order to stop a war. They've been attacked by airships, shadow dragons, and giant dinosaurs flown halfway around the world, and even that day have teleportation circled 4 times, trying to find a wizard strong enough to cast this spell. The wizards here are not their friends, and they are ill-equipped to face an arcane battle at this stage. So what do I do? Lo and behold, the only wizard left behind, there's a war going on, powerful enough to cast said spell, it's their old pal Corvin, who refuses to cast it, still stung by his previous embarrassing encounter with them. The half-orc has long since betrayed the party and gone demonic warlock-ish, so he's no longer there to lend his copious charm to the scene, but the characters have learned. They're stronger now, and not as intimidated by the head necromancer. They are also now nominal clerics and paladins of the god of the dead, which gives them a bit of leverage that they didn't have prior. They decide to intimidate the poor wizard into performing the spell. And he rolls, naturally, a 1. He agrees to teleport the party. Now, in each scenario, the reasons why the party acted in such a manner was because they were desperate and exhausted. The one man standing in their way, a bitter, spiteful wizard, has suddenly become something of a saving grace for the party. Twice. But the real funny part is what happens next. I've never cast teleport before, not by the new rules anyhow. I just haven't looked into it for whatever reason. Like, I knew the spell existed, but I'm more or less cutting my teeth in the new system at this point and have no idea how the spell works. I start having Corvin draw a circle. The party wizard, who's been eagerly metagame dreaming about various spells he'll unlock in the future, goes, "What are you doing?" "Casting teleportation," Corvin says, meekly. "You shouldn't need to draw a circle. That's teleportation circle. A different spell."
"Oh,"
he commences hedging.
"Well, I've always used a circle. It's just comforting, you know."
"How often do you cast this spell, Corvin?" Corvin shrugs.
"I don't know, once or twice. Never really needed it. I have everything I need here in this tower."
"How familiar with this island are you, Corvin?" Corvin looks at everyone nervously.
"Not very. Like, I've been there once, but it's been years."
The wizard pales and looks around at his party members.
"Are you guys sure we want to do this?"
Everyone agrees. Party wizard then says, out of character, "Okay, Nick, roll percentage." Confused, I roll 10%. The wizard reads out the text.
"Something goes wrong. The teleportation backfires and everyone involved takes 3d10 necrotic damage."
Hurts, but that's not so bad. "Now roll again," the party wizard says quietly.
"Huh?"
I ask. Wizard, quoting.
"It is possible for the spell to undergo multiple mishaps. Roll again."
17.
"We have another mishap."
Ouch.
"Roll."
33.
"Seriously?"
Yes.
"It's another mishap."
"I'm at 1 health," says the bard. "Lucky you," says our beat-up ranger. "I just died. What are the odds that this spell works?" Wizard, quoting.
"For not very familiar with the terrain being teleported to, there is a 1 to 33% chance of a mishap occurring. Roll again."
52. The wizard holds up a d8.
"Do you want 1 to be north and go clockwise?"
Sure. Hands me the dice, then hands me 2 more.
"Roll this times that. This is the percentage of the distance we're traveling that we miss our destination by. Then roll the direction we miss it. You said the southern tip of the island, yes?"
Nod.
And you said the giant hurricane is roughly 10 to 12 kilometers off the coast in every direction.
Everyone stops talking and looks over at me and the 8-sided dice in my hand. The island is a tiny sliver in the center of a vast ocean. The only safe direction is north. Any other number I roll will kill the entire party. I roll 1. Everyone jumps up and cheers, minus the ranger, but he's not completely dead as we have a fairly competent cleric on the squad, and pats each other on the back, congratulating themselves on having avoided the worst possible TPK they all agreed to risk. Corvin sheepishly traces a teleportation circle, I'm at least familiar with this spell in the new rules, and heads back to the tower, having very nearly killed his arch enemies quite by accident. And the wizard player looks over at me smugly. I say, "Do you want a DM?" He grins. "Not a fucking chance!" This one comes from Dungeon Crawl Classics, which is a bit of an offshoot of D&D, emphasizing a lot of old school design conventions and aesthetics. Whereas most OSR games seek to republish old D&D rule sets, this one takes the game down an alternate evolutionary path built around a certain sense of discovery and unpredictability. And part of that unpredictability is, of course, critical hit and critical fumble tables. Basically, the party is exploring a fortress that is chock full of beastmen and horrible cursed things trying to gain entry to a tower. They've dealt with a cursed well that causes people to gain random mutations when they get close to it. They've dealt with a giant crumbling hole in the earth, with the faces of the anguished dead swirling out of it in a rising mist. And they've been attacked by a pseudopod of black tar inhabiting a burnt-out church. By this point, they are fed up with being spooked and want to knock some heads. So they bum rush the tower despite the pair of beastman archers that are sniping them from the ramparts. Carmack, the party's wizard, decides to do something about those archers with his newfound magic powers. So he whips out the charm spell. In DCC, spells don't have set effects. Rather, you make a spellcasting check, and the higher your check result, the more impressive and large scale the result of the spell. Carmack gets a roll in the 20s, high enough to turn a beastman into his ally for 3 weeks.
Oi, you there? Meh. Help us out, would you? Meh.
And thus, the Beastman turns towards its ally and begins fighting on the player character's side. I just relinquish control of him to Carmack's player, informing him that said Beastman has a bow and arrow for a weapon. After shooting his own ally dead, one especially large Beastman with a bull's head and a huge axe begins stomping down the hall towards him. Carmack's Beastman takes aim with his bow and makes to shoot him point blank. He draws back the string and twang, bah! 1. Critical failure. He rolled on the fumble table, the bow snapped. The Minotaur snorts, steam practically materializing from its nostrils. It raises its axe to butcher Carmack's buddy like a farm animal. Thunk. Moo. 1. Critical failure. I roll on the fumble table, and his weapon gets caught in something when he tries to swing it. He looks up, seeing the axe head stuck in a beam overhead, and tries to pull it loose haphazardly. Carmack's buddy dives for his fallen companion's bow, brings it up directly into the Minotaur's chest. Natural 20. He shoots it up straight through its ribs, out of the base of its neck, and into its chin, killing it in 1 hit. I then roll the Die of Fate, an affectation I picked up from Burning Wheel. Natural 1. At the base of the spiral stairs in the tower, a snake-like beastman taunts the other players.
Do you think you can strike me down with that pathetic excuse for swordsmanship? I am invincible.
Moments later, the giant minotaur-like beastman's corpse tumbles down the stairs backwards, landing on him and crushing him to death. Carmack's beastman emerges from the landing overhead, shouldering his bow and letting out a triumphant meh. All the while, Carmack and company had been cleaning up a group of beastmen in here, and that finished the encounter. And thus, he was given a name. Rendax, greatest of beastmen. I was DMing, not playing, with a group of friends and my teenage nephew. My nephew was new to D&D, so the older players were advising him what to do. My nephew was playing a cleric of Nerral. The party was traveling at night through an orc-infested forest. Hoping to avoid any patrols, they told my nephew to cast a silence spell on his first round should they encounter anything. I rolled a random encounter and alerted the party that they heard something coming towards them without telling them what it was. My nephew won the initiative roll and went first, casting the silence spell as instructed. The random encounter was 3d4 giant bats. The bats flew into the area covered by the silence spell, went completely blind, and panicked. They flew into trees, the player characters, and one even flew into a player character's horse. The horse panicked and fled, carrying the player character on a mad ride through the midnight orc-infested forest. Another player character was thrown from their horse, which then bolted, never to be found again. The characters couldn't communicate with each other due to the silence spell and the chaos. Several of them were injured, but nothing major. By this time, everyone was laughing too hard to tell me what their characters were doing. By the time the silence spell wore off, our heroes had managed to attract the attention of an orc patrol, so they were immediately involved in another battle, even though they were still short one character who had calmed his horse and was trying to get back to the group. And when that battle wrapped up, the wounded were tended to, and the party was trying to decide if the horseless character should ride the pack animal or double up with someone. The player who had told my nephew to cast the silence spell in the first place turned to my nephew and said, "Holy bats, Death Man," and we all burst out laughing again. Hello, my frosty little honey buns of glimmering cosmic love, and thank you for expanding your node of universal consciousness in our direction for the full duration of this video. If you're a DM or player looking for a group, you may have some luck on MrRipper's Group Finder Discord server, and if you're looking to share your story with us and have it read professionally on the channel, please do so on our official subreddit r/MrRipper. And as always, if you have a hilarious Nat 1 you'd like to share with us, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you're wondering where our weekly D&D stream went, we've relocated to twitch.tv/fire_n_dice, and Ripper will be joining us on the adventure soon, once he's all set up in his shiny new studio. My hope for you today is that you are practicing pause before you speak, respond, or react. How often do you pause, put yourself in somebody else's shoes, reflect, and then come back and act on that? It's hard to do, especially when you're feeling wound up or struggling with something, but I promise you, it is so worth your practice. If you love me and want me to be happy, follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Dave Makes Noises, or check out my website, www.davemakesnoises.com. Please like for advantage and sub for Nat 20s. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you next time.